Forgetting lessons learned, that is the topic of tonight's Byline. Some really disturbing news about the terror suspects in Canada and the U.S. News that makes me wonder if the lessons of 9/11 have been forgotten. In Canada, reports that one of the suspects arrested on Monday in the plot to blow up a Via Rail train over the Niagara Gorge actually met with Al-Qaeda before coming to Canada. According to the reports, Chiheb Essegar met with an Al-Qaeda operative before coming to Canada to study at the University of Sherbrooke in 2008. This meeting put him on the radar of Canadian security officials. Now, if these reports are accurate, I have one question. Why was Essegar allowed into Canada if we had information on him associating with Al-Qaeda? It's not like we had to let him in. He wanted to come here to study on a student visa. We could have said no. We could have said we're all full up. We could have said that we were washing our hair that day. Anything but yes. Government ministers will not comment on this case directly because it is before the courts, but Immigration Minister Jason Kenney was asked whether meeting with someone from Al-Qaeda should mean that you're banned from Canada. Kenney said such meetings should raise questions and visas should be checked against security files.
Their file, if coming from a high-risk country, would be referred to the Canada Border Services Agency, who in turn may refer it to the RCMP or CSIS, depending on what risk factors they see. The RCMP and CSIS will then do a review of the person's background. They may contact allies to see what information they have. If there's any information that they may have terrorist affiliations, then clearly that would be grounds for an inadmissibility finding.
So why didn't this happen? Simple fact is we don't know. Essegar's entry into Canada does predate Kenney's time at immigration and the many changes he's brought in. It also predates Richard Fadden being appointed to head up CSIS. Perhaps the two government bodies were not talking the way they should have been back in 2008, because it looks like they may have dropped the ball here. To me, this looks like we forgot a major lesson of 9/11, and that is that government agencies cannot operate in silos, where one division has no clue what the other's doing. Did we forget that lesson? Certainly looks like it, not only with Essegar, but also with Rahid Jasser. News broken by Sun Media late today that this man was ordered deported from Canada in 1998. Except it never happened. Apparently, the honor system for deportation does not work. Now, in between, he had convictions, including uttering death threats. He wasn't deported. He was picked up on a deportation order in 2004, we're told, but still not kicked out of Canada. That was 3 years after 9/11. Had we forgotten the lessons of that day already? And perhaps. It sure looks like they've forgotten them lately in the United States. Today in Texas, there are 5 living presidents. They all gathered to open the George W. Bush Presidential Library. It contains the photographs, the videos, the documents that defined the Bush presidency. Part of their collection is a massive chunk of steel from Ground Zero. The 9/11 attacks defined the Bush presidency, and while there's much to criticize in his legacy, including gross overspending and the expanding role of the government in Washington into state and local education initiatives, George W. Bush understood what happened on 9/11 and worked hard to make sure it never happened again. I shudder to think what the world would have been like had Albert Gore been president when the towers fell. Can you imagine Gore, the guy that sold out to Al Jazeera, every jihadi's favorite network, calling them better than American news channels? Can you imagine him in charge on 9/11? The world would be a far different place today, and I'm not sure it'd be good. But thankfully, it was Bush, not Gore, who was in charge in Washington after those attacks. One of the things Bush did was tear down walls between departments. It turns out that all kinds of information was known about the 19 hijackers, but it wasn't shared. Agencies did not talk to one another. That was stopped after 9/11. It was a lesson not just for the U.S., but the whole world. It changed government intelligence far beyond the U.S., or at least it was supposed to. It looks like we goofed in 2008. In the States, they've goofed as well. After receiving information from Russia in March 2011, the FBI put Tamerlan Tsarnaev on a watch list. He was put on a different watch list later in the year by the CIA after they were contacted by Russian officials. We've heard that the FBI interviewed Tsarnaev and cleared him. But now we're told that after that interview, the Russians contacted the FBI again. In fact, in a story in the Boston Globe, the paper cites senators briefed on the file as saying the Russians contacted the FBI multiple times. According to senators at that briefing, there is once again a problem of agencies not sharing information.
Boston is becoming, to me, a case study in system failure. Between Benghazi in Boston, our systems are failing and we're going backwards. We need to understand that bin Laden may be dead, but the war against radical Islam is very much alive.
The FBI briefing also apparently told senators that in 2011, Tamerlan had sent a flurry of text messages to his mother about his willingness to die for Islam. Would that have been caught if information was being shared properly? Would that have been caught if agencies were working together the way they're supposed to? It's a valid question to ask as we look to the pictures in Texas of the Bush Presidential Library opening, as we remember the images of 9/11, and as we remember that there were lessons that were supposed to be taken from those attacks, lessons we were not supposed to have forgotten, but may have. It's time to remember those lessons in you. And that's the byline.
For reasons only they know, the police in their press conference thought it appropriate to raise the issue of my client's status in Canada, and I can tell you that he is a permanent resident in Canada and has lived here for 20 years and has very deep roots here. I think it's quite regrettable that the police chose to make an issue of that. It seems intended in the current climate to simply demonize my client, and that's most regrettable.
Dehumanize your client, Mr. Norris? No, now that we know more about your client, we're wondering once again, why was he still even in Canada? John Norris, the lawyer for Rahid Chasser there talking. Anthony Furey joins me now. And Anthony, you've got a great column that I want to get to. We've posted it at Lilley's Pad. I want to get to it in a moment. But there's news that broke late today. Rahid Chasser, ordered deported in '98. His convictions in the early 2000s, still not deported. Picked up in 2004. Still not deported. Now, there is a reason put forward by the government that just makes my blood boil, but it's one that's understandable.
Look, Brian, there's so many cases here in which people are essentially standing on a hill with a megaphone saying, I'm a bad apple, and it's only going to get worse. You know, even in domestic affairs, whenever I read about drunk driving cases and someone has unfortunately killed a person from drunk driving, you find out, oh, well, they'd done it before. They'd had their license revoked. Why are they still driving now? And your monologue brought up a great point that it's not even about getting tough on crime with new laws and new state powers. It's about enforcing the laws that are there.
And working properly.
Well, exactly. And what a novel idea. 1998, someone's ordered to be deported. Of course, 15 years later, still here and look, planning a terror plot. People, it's crazy. They even tried to deport him and he was still here.
Well, because he is a stateless person. He is a Palestinian who was born in the United Arab Emirates, and because of a United Nations treaty that we signed, we're not allowed to get rid of him. So even if this guy is found to be guilty of what he's, the charges he's facing now, we will not get rid of him.
Well, there are a number of great things that you can claim and a lot of great procedural technicalities that really work to your advantage when you're playing the system and want to stay in Canada. And we see that with so many people. And you know, we've really got to empower ourselves to be able to try and enforce these things as much as possible. I understand this particular case, okay, maybe we had to keep him. But at the same time, the flags that are raised time and time again, the deportation, the fighting the deportation, the not following the law, the petty crimes, all those things, they add up to something. And we continue, the smoking gun here, Major Nidal Hassan, Fort Hood shooter, in communication with Anwar al-Awlaki, the main, most prominent recruiter for terrorists. And of course, the FBI field agents watch their communications where he's essentially saying, walk like a duck, talk like a duck, you know what's going on here. The field agents, they say, oh, it's just spiritual communication, nothing going on.
Yeah, we don't want to get involved. Look, your column today in Sun Media newspapers and up at lilleyspad.ca, you take on the issue of moderate Islam and who is and who isn't a moderate Muslim. You say that we've got to look at this again. Why?
Well, we're just throwing the term out here, anywhere. The other day there was a press conference by CARE Canada. That's the Council for American Islamic Relations Canada branch. Now, they had a press conference in which they said, thank you so much to the police for capturing these guys on Monday, for arresting them, and we completely denounce the attack. And then, of course, all the media and everyone on social media says, moderate Muslims, great people, standing up for Western democracy. Okay, fine, I appreciate the fact that they're denouncing this attack, and there's no reason to doubt their sincerity. But at the same time, CARE Canada, well, their previous executive directors got behind a guy who wanted to implement Sharia law in Ontario, what I consider a very draconian Sharia law. So I really don't like when we lump together just anybody who says they don't like terrorism.
Okay, and you're relating this back to Asagar and his comments that Canadian law doesn't apply. I want to read this quote. This is by Syed Mumtaz Ali. Sorry, I didn't get the pronunciation right, Saeed. In short, not being able to live by Muslim law means one cannot exercise freedom of religion guaranteed under the Charter. This is so because, in effect, Canadian courts are forcing Muslims to act in a way contrary to their beliefs or their conscience. To be equal does not mean that one identical law has to be applied to every diverse community of people. This was a Canadian lawyer saying we need Sharia here. This is not the defendant saying your law doesn't apply to me. But there's a hint of the same strain in there, that we can't live under secular Canadian law.
Exactly, and that's why I brought that up in the column to begin with, because this imam, who is a moderate imam, wants to bring beautiful, moderate Sharia law in Ontario so we can all celebrate our diversity together, is essentially saying the same thing that Asagai is saying as to why he does not have to really stand in front of a Canadian court and take them seriously, because it's not Islamic law. And this group, Care Canada, moderate Muslims, well, they were getting behind this guy. So sure, I appreciate the fact that there are a lot of groups out there who are denouncing terrorism and they're saying, look, this one young man is getting too radical. But it really upsets me when we lump these people in who support things like Sharia, lump them in with someone like Tariq Fatah, people like Raheel Raza, who get death threats for denouncing Sharia law, which is not a moderate proposition at all.
All right, Anthony Furey, good talking to you. And of course, if you want to find Anthony's column, you can find it at lillyspad.ca.